Welcome to the S.O.A.P Bible Study Series from Oak Tree Community Church in South Bend, Indiana. We're working our way through the book of Job, and we are so close to the end. We've got 2 weeks left, 2 weeks. And a couple of weeks ago, we sort of made this turn. We started getting some answers to our questions. This week, if you did not know what was coming, this is like the
special surprise.
Yeah, this is the Alfred Hitchcock twist
advertised for a couple weeks
that nobody knew was coming.
Yeah,
even though Job's been asking for it for a long time.
Very good point. Very good point. So last week there was a guy by the name of Elihu, and he makes an appearance, and he had been speaking for a couple weeks, but it turns out he had been there the whole time.
Yeah.
And he intentionally said, "Look, I'm the youngest of you guys. I wanted to hear what you had to say." And I'm done listening to you guys now, and here's the way I see it.
Right.
And he actually accused Job of some sins.
Yeah.
And I was happy from, after 25 chapters of the three guys not being able to decide on how Job actually sinned, that Elihu came up with some things that were like, oh, I see what he's talking about.
Yeah, and he was
I see where he's going there. Yeah. But it was weird that this guy just all of a sudden showed up. Well, here's the deal this week. Somebody else is showing up.
Yeah,
right?
we have a new player,
Yeah.
and not one, if you don't know the story, not one that you would expect. This is the
big guy.
Yeah.
Yeah. So God shows up.
All of a sudden, the Lord answered Job.
Yeah.
What has Job been asking for this whole time?
All I want to do, I want to present my case to God.
That's right. If he would just show up, I would
be the defense attorney, and here's what I would do. There was at least 2 chapters where his case is laid out.
Yeah.
I think God read it, and okay.
All right, let's play.
That seems so. So we can't get mad that a new player shows up, because God can do what He wants to do and show up when He wants to show up.
Yeah,
and He does.
And if you thought Elihu was right on target.
Yeah.
You might have some issues with Elihu.
Yeah.
You're not going to have any issues for these next couple of chapters.
So God answers Job out of the whirlwind.
Yeah.
And it starts out with that. Is there significance to the whirlwind?
Yes and no.
All right.
Because God actually has 2 speeches. We're going to do one this week and one next week. Both of them start with the same phrase. The word whirlwind means some kind of windstorm. Okay, it was the same word that is used when Elijah was taken to heaven. In the Psalms, we find it a couple of times, in the prophets a couple of times. It's just this concept of this windstorm. So I think this is my opinion. Okay, my speculation, that it seems when God shows up in let's say. To talk, when God shows up in all of His majesty and everything, and He's not really showing off, but He is bringing the full force of who He is.
Yeah.
So think Mount Sinai,
Right.
the thunder,
That's right where I
lightning,
went. Yeah.
and He's showing
Burning
up.
bush.
The burning bush, except there was no wind; it was just burning. Right? Here, He's coming in; He's swooping in. Right? The same thing I think happened in the Garden of Eden. I think the translation, in the cool of the day, the sound of Him walking in the garden, I don't think that is the force of what's going on. I think He came rushing in, and there was this wind storm that was rushing in, and that's part of the reason that they hid. When God speaks out of the wind, we also have Elijah. There's the windstorm, there's the earthquake, there's the everything. And then, again, it's the same concept of this still small voice. I don't think it's a still small voice. I don't think it's a whisper.
I always love that one.
I know. Sorry to burst your bubble. It's the same concept. There's this, God is showing up and God is speaking. Elihu just got done saying, when God speaks, it sounds like thunder.
Yeah, exactly.
So what Elihu described and what Job has been asking for, here comes God swooshing in.
Yeah.
Let's talk.
Yeah.
So I do think,
and in fact, that's what he basically says too.
Yeah.
Yeah. He says, Job, you're saying words without knowledge. And he says, all right, get ready for all right, man, get ready for a difficult task.
Yep.
I'm going to ask you questions. You're going to answer me.
Which is not exactly what Job was what he was planning. He wanted to state his case, and God says, "No, we're going to play 20 questions."
Yeah, I get to go first. I get to go first. So in chapter 38, God asks a bunch of questions. I counted them. I counted 23. I don't know if I'm right or not.
Okay.
But I was going through, and some were kind of hard. Like when's it a second question?
Yeah.
So I ended up, I think, counting question marks.
Question marks. Fair enough.
But-
so there's a minimum of 23. What you're saying?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. But I think the most famous is the first one.
Yeah.
In there, and that is God starts off with Job on these 23 questions. The first one is, where were you when I laid the foundation of the earth?
Man, that is such a. I love that question.
And
I wouldn't want to be asked that question.
Yeah, exactly.
But I love
Exactly.
watching it as a third party.
Exactly. And I can see Job, and then pop. The bubbles popped and just deflating, and I mean, God put all this effort into building the world, and not only that, the foundation. And wow, I think that was the beginning of him realizing,
Yeah, this is.
this is not good.
And all of these questions,
Yeah, I was going to ask you, they seem to go in an order, right?
Yeah.
Foundation and building the world, or creation and the stars, and
Yep.
then down to animals even.
Yep.
Is
I
it in
think-
creation order?
I think it follows
Yeah.
really close, if not exactly. I think it follows the creation week, which is really cool for a couple of reasons. First of all, because if you just read Genesis 1 and God said and God said and God said and God said, we forget that there's thought process behind it.
Right.
So what God said was,
Yeah, let there be
let
light.
there be, light, let there be dry land, whatever. But what he did was it was measured, it was thought through, it was very intentional.
How did he decide this star goes here?
Yeah.
How did he decide this constellation is over here?
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
The other thing is in verse 7 here, chapter 38, verse 7, it says, when the morning stars sang in chorus and all the sons of God shouted for joy. Now, this is really interesting because the phrase sons of God showed up in chapters 1 and 2. The sons of God came to report to him, and Satan was with them.
In Job,
In Job.
chapter 1. Yeah. So these would be the angels.
Not Genesis
Yeah.
1 and 2, Job 1 and 2.
Yeah.
So, which means that the angels were there when God created the earth.
Yeah. How cool is that?
So he created the angels first. We don't have a record of their creation in Genesis.
Right.
So the angels were created, and then God said, let's create the rest of the...
So one, created beings, and two, when were they created?
The order,
Yeah, the order. Yeah.
It's not given to us in Genesis 1. We don't find out about it. Obviously, they're there by the time, we've got Satan, we've got the cherubim, we've got all that stuff. But this tells us where in the creation order angels were, which, if you're reading just straight through the Bible, that's a long way from Genesis 1 to Job 38.
Yeah. Right. Right. So in chapter 39, God is still asking questions.
Oh yeah, he doesn't stop.
Yeah, he asks around 17 more, but these questions are a little bit different. He goes into really detail on the animals, and I think I think I brought it up last week too. Like how does the mountain goat give birth?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And if you think of and I didn't think of it till you even brought it up. Mountain goats on a 2-inch ledge. Yeah. How do you give birth there, and how does that work? Yeah. But I think the main point for all of these is that Job quickly comes to the understanding of, I don't have an answer for any of these.
Any of it.
On here.
Yeah.
And I think for us, the takeaway is, I'm not sure we know these answers either, even, a couple thousand years later.
Yeah.
But I do love it that we learn more about God.
Yeah.
And to me, it's so cool that God talks about a horse in here. Okay, so God created a horse. I can get my head around that.
Yep.
But God's excited about the mane.
Yeah.
And God's excited about, hey, did you notice, like, when a horse goes into battle, he doesn't get scared? I did that. Okay, I added that part. But that's kind of the way.
That's what he's doing.
Yeah, right. And he seems to be excited to be able to talk about his creation. Because who does God talk to?
Yeah.
And
Well, it's sort of, and again, man, you just all of these comparisons with the time of Abraham. But remember when God was talking to Abraham about the promise He's making and what He's going to do, He's like, count the stars, if you can. Count the grains of sand at the seashore, if you can. Right. We've got in the Psalms, we've got He knows the number of hairs on your head. Why does that matter? Jesus in the Sermon on the Mount, a sparrow does not even fall without the Father knowing. Why does that matter? Because God is intentional. He does care about what's going on here. And if God cares about the number of stars, and God cares about the mane on a horse and how a mountain goes, if God can put that kind of thought into all of that, now let's talk about humans.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's the whole point.
That is, yeah.
Yep. So then we get into chapter 40, and God says, will the one who contends with the Almighty correct him? Right? So he's now talking to Job. Right?
It's almost like the guy in the courtroom, the bailiff or the whatever. He's like, and it is now time for the defendant to speak. All right.
Yeah. So Job comes up with what I think everybody would come up with. I'm unworthy.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and remember, like we said, for 25 chapters, it was the same thing. And Job actually does change during this time.
Yeah.
He starts out with, I'm not going to confront God at all, and he ends up with, oh yeah, I want the courtroom scene in there. And then he also ends up with, he boasted that he would be a prince before God too.
Yeah.
That's not happening.
No.
His game plan is out the window.
Yeah, not only does he not answer the questions, not only does he not make his defense or his lay out his whole case, he's just like, how about if I just sit here with my hand over my mouth so I don't accidentally be stupid?
I'm throwing myself on the mercy of the court. Is another way to say it.
Yep.
So we'll find next week God doesn't accept this answer.
Yeah.
And so there's more to it.
It seems, because we're stopping just a couple of verses into chapter 40, because that's sort of Job's response. And it seems like if you get to this point and you don't know what's coming, God's response should be good. Okay, we can be
now
done
we can
here.
start.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he won't do that. But this is the last time that Job speaks, from what I remember. I think
No, he has one more. There's a confession.
there's a oh yeah, you're right. Okay. There was several chapters where Job didn't speak while Elihu was speaking, right?
Yeah.
And then God came right in. Yeah, you're right. But he says he's not going to speak anymore. He says I'm done. He says I'm done with
well,
this.
and that's why it's like God said, no, you can't even get that right.
Yeah.
I'll have you talk one more time.
So what's the we've got all these goals. So what's the big takeaway with God here?
Well, I think from our standpoint, right. I think we learn a little bit more about God in here. I think there's a number of takeaways. Not that we care about the horse's mane, but I care that God cares about it. And and he's intentionally pointing it out, and like you said, okay, if he's doing this for how mountain goats are born and how manes go on horses and other animals, even next week he even talks about them. How about us?
Yeah.
And we're in his image.
Yeah.
There's a lot in there that we don't know about that he's given us.
Yeah. Because just reading this series of questions and everything, I mean, he's really given Job a smackdown.
Yeah,
I mean, he's spanking him hard, but he's not going to stop there.
Right. Well, it's part of that, and I not that Job deserves it, right? Because that would mean I would deserve it too, and I don't want that. But the realization of, I think a lot of times we have the wrong idea of who God is.
Yeah.
It's who I want him to be, right? And who I make him to be. And then, the thought process in my head, which makes sense to me, but nobody else.
Yeah.
And God is God. And I think God is making himself known here.
And that's why when we talk about the path, it's about knowing him better and loving him more. Because if we know him, we will want to love him, we will want to serve him, we will want to know him more, right? And so there's this cycle.
Well, and from my standpoint, I just want the loving, caring parts. And then I come across, fear of the Lord. Let's just skip a couple pages till we get back to the loving and caring. But there's a lot more to God than a lot of us anticipate in here.
Yeah. So there's one more week. We've got a couple more chapters, and it will come to a conclusion. And even if you know the end of the story, stick with it, because there's a few things left that are worth exploring, more than just let's read over it and be done. So stick with us one more week. Hope it's been helpful to you.
If you've made it this far,
then you have to do
one more week.
If you can make it through those chapters, you can absolutely finish this one.
That's the good part.
For this week's reading, don't do it too quickly. Don't just gloss
It's
over.
easy to blow through it.
Yeah,
right. But take
what about
your
this?
time.
What about this? What about this?
Yep.
Now, actually, feel the weight of every question. Feel the weight of the question coming from the whirlwind, coming from God and His thunder and His lightning, and asking, "Where were you?" Put yourself, maybe not in Job's exact, shoes here, but where were you? Let's make sure that we have a correct understanding of who we are, where we are in relation to God. And even though if you know Jesus is your Savior, even if you're, a child of God and that whole context that we have now, we're still not God. And He still wants us to know Him better. And this is a really great section to cause us to be humble and think about it in a correct relationship with God. So take your time, do the reading slowly, carefully, and really get to know your God this week. And we'll see you next week.